Hi, my name's Elly Greeny and I'm the Commercial Director at Transition Partners. We're a tech recruitment consultancy with an office in Leeds covering the UK market and an office based in Berlin. I've worked within tech for the past 5 years and find the market fascinating. I'm really passionate about helping women not only get in tech, but really advance their career with an exciting industry that can provide endless opportunities. I love networking and finding out about other people's stories. I decided to set up the journey of a woman in tech to share knowledge, wisdom, and hopefully have a laugh along the way. Feel free to get in touch on LinkedIn to see how you can get involved. I hope you enjoy the podcast. Hello everyone and welcome to the journey of a woman in tech. So I'm super excited today to have a guest who's based over in Berlin. We've got Marissa Mocenigo, who is the engineering manager at TaxFix. She has a diverse background working as a software engineer in everything from startups to research. Now working at TaxFix, she's taking on a new challenge in tech management with the mission of developing happy, effective software teams. Hello, Marissa.
Hello, thanks so much for having me on. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I know. It's so great to have you on the podcast today. And I've been loving your energy this morning. So yeah, it's fantastic to have you on the show and finding out about all your stories. So let's start with TaxFix then. So tell me what you're up to at TaxFix.
Yeah, I've been at TaxFix for about a year. I've been working in engineering management for about 4 years now, actually.
Okay.
It really happened quickly. But then about a year ago, I was looking for something where I would be learning from the people around me. I had been working at a startup before then, and I'd kind of been like figuring a bunch of things out on my own about being a manager. And so I started looking for a company where I'd be able to be surrounded by people that I'd be learning from, and I'd be able to see the impact and difference that I would be making. And I found that I had a really great value alignment with TaxFix, and so I ended up moving here. And I think I've been getting everything I've been looking for in terms of my learning experience, but I've been challenged in a lot of ways as well. I had been growing up my team and building my team myself before, and so now I'm meeting people who have very different experiences, backgrounds, who have been working at larger and smaller companies, and managing everybody together has been a great experience. I think overall, it's been a great learning experience.
So when you joined TaxFix, then you inherited a team of how many?
Well, I ended up taking on 3 teams originally with a total of around 11 people. I'm actually now with 2 teams with 11 people. So it's a little bit different. Luckily, a little less context to keep track of day to day, but still the same number of people.
That's great. And are your intentions to kind of grow out the team over the next few years then, I'm sure?
Yeah, we're hiring and growing a lot at TaxFix. That's actually one of the challenges that has been really exciting for me, is that I have worked at a lot of startups, and most of my management experience before this was in a small company, in a startup, and being able to take that company from we've essentially doubled in size since I started with the company a year ago, and that transition has been something that has challenged me a lot. I know when I was a software engineer working at a previous company, we had the same transition. And I kept looking at management being like, what are you guys doing? These decisions don't make sense to me. We should be going in this direction or that direction. And now that I'm here making the decisions, I feel like I have a chance to kind of influence that in a way that I didn't when I was a software engineer, and hopefully for the best for my teams.
Such an awesome opportunity. And what tech stack do you use at TaxFix?
It's a combination of a lot of different things, actually. So we're usually using JavaScript. We're using React and React Native for our front end. We're using Node.js for our back end in some places, but then we're also using Elixir for our back end in a few other places. So it's a pretty interesting mix.
Yeah, that's great. Fantastic. Okay, let's go all the way back then, Marissa, because it's obviously impressive. You're an engineering manager already, leading a team within a really exciting startup at such a young age. So I'd love to know, let's go back to the start. How did you develop and progress your career to get to where you are today? So where did it all begin?
Yeah, I guess there's a lot of points that I think contributed to my start into engineering. So for example, I was actually, when I went to university, I was a Latin and classics major. I wanted to study Latin.
Wow.
And I never thought that I'd be doing computer science. I came from a very computer heavy family, and
Yeah.
I
Oh,
was going to go
really?
do my own thing. And
Yeah.
I ended up taking a computer science class, and I was like, wow, I love this. This is everything I love about Latin, but I can then apply it and build something. And I have made something at the end of the day. And that for me was so satisfying that I ended up switching my major to computer science. And that really started me on the path. So I thought forever that I would be going into academia, but then again, I had another curveball after I graduated. I applied to a few jobs, and I ended up getting something where they also would pay for graduate school. And so I decided I'll just go
Oh,
into the
wow.
workforce for a little bit and see how it fits. And I loved it. I
And
ended
was
up
that back in the US then?
Yes, yeah. I was living
Yeah.
in Boston at the time, so I started off actually working at MIT's Lincoln Labs, which was a big research institute. And from there, I started at my first startup experience, which is where I sort of got that bug. I moved to a company in working in robotics, and that
Oh,
that
cool.
was it for me. So I was hooked.
That's such a great first opportunity, isn't it? And so you wanted to rebel against it then, because your family originate, you've got quite a lot of strong computer techie background then?
Yeah, well, I think I didn't realize that I was rebelling against it. Like when I was a kid, my dad would be like, "Hey, do you want to learn Java?" And I'd be like, "No, I want to play outside." But then there were a lot of little things that I was doing that I didn't even connect to computer science. So for example, I would build websites. I had all these big dreams as a kid, and I was always trying to like launch my own business. So I was
Oh,
building
great.
websites, playing around with like graphics. I was writing games and things for my friends to play in sort of this proprietary coding language, and I just never thought about those things as engineering. So when I was started playing around with computer science and taking classes, I was like, wow, this is something that I really enjoy, and I can see the connection back to some of my hobbies and interests, and it just kind of naturally spiraled from there.
That's so great. So then back from that role then at Boston, what got you to TaxFix today then? Let's talk about that journey. So you started in working for this startup that was working in robotics. What languages were you developing in back then?
I was pretty much entirely using C++ and sometimes
Okay.
Python up until almost until I moved. I had some experience working in a little bit with JavaScript before I moved here, but mostly I had been working in robotics or working at hardware startups until I moved to Berlin. And
Okay.
I came here for a few reasons. I'd been living in the US. I lived in the US for all of my life essentially,
Mhm.
and I thought I wanted to see someplace else. I wanted to experience something different, and I started applying to jobs, and I ended up getting a role at another company at an e-commerce startup here. And I thought this is something so different. I really want to explore it. And I moved here for the company, and 2 months later they closed down. So
Oh gosh.
I was
So when
in Berlin.
let's
Yeah.
go back to when you were looking then. So when you were applying for jobs elsewhere, you could obviously bit of an adventurer. You wanted to apply for something completely different. Were you looking at Berlin specifically, or were you just looking at Europe in general? And
I was looking all over the place. I applied to jobs in London and Utrecht and Stockholm, in Berlin. I applied all over, and I actually ended up choosing Berlin because of two reasons. One was that when I was looking for tech jobs here, there seemed to be everything. Everything
yeah,
that I could imagine or wanted to do in every industry was here. It didn't matter how obscure or weird the idea seemed to be, there seemed to be somebody pursuing their really passionate projects in Berlin. And then the other, of course, was the cost of living. So moving from Boston, which is a very high cost of living
mm,
city, to Berlin, which is more in the middle, it made the move just much more accessible for me.
that's so great, amazing. So you were saying then, sorry, when you started your new role and the journey over
Oh
in
yeah,
Berlin.
the company closed down, and that was a bit of a shock. Now I was in Berlin, and I had to find a new job quite quickly, and I ended up finding a company, Mitte, which was
Hmm.
doing a smart water purifier so that you could mineralize water in your home essentially by running it through this filtration system. And it kind of pulled in some of my experience working in hardware and working in robotics before. And it was a management role. So I would be building a team completely from the ground up. And I had a lot of freedom to build what I wanted to. And I saw it as a fantastic challenge and an interesting experience, and that first step into jumping into management.
So great, amazing. And how have you found leadership then? Because it's a funny one, isn't it? You kind of, it's not always what you expect, and there's highs and lows as part of that. And how have you found that journey?
Absolutely. Yeah, I absolutely agree. There's highs and lows, and it's not what you expect. I think I love it, and I feel like I really excel in this role, and
Mm,
it draws on some skills that I never really got to put into effect when I was working strictly in software engineering.
mm,
But there are days where I'm like, why am I doing this? And then there are days where I'm like, look at this impact I made. This makes everything worth it. I feel like I'm in meetings a lot more. My stresses have changed completely. Like what stressed me out before and what stresses me out today is two totally different things. I'm not saying that one stress is worse than the other, but it's very different. Like when I was working as a software engineer, if I made a mistake, my bugs go out into the world and maybe a user has a poor experience and they're not so happy with the product. Now, if I make a mistake that's impacting my coworkers, the people that I'm working with every day, the people who are relying on me to make good decisions and have their best interests in mind. It's sort of a different stress. And I've learned one thing that has been very challenging for me to learn is that you can't make everybody happy, because that's
mm,
really what I wanted to do. I wanted to be the manager that I didn't have very often in some of my more challenging positions and some of my more challenging moments in my career. And I wanted to be there for other people going through that same situation, and feeling and knowing that I can't do everything for everybody all of the time has been probably the thing that stresses me out and is the hardest for me in this role.
yeah. How do you manage that then? Because that's tough, isn't it? And here's something I definitely struggle with as a leader. I just want to make everyone happy and try and do the best by everyone all the time. And I
Yeah.
think that's a difficult one, isn't it? It's so difficult to manage and get it right.
One of the words of advice that somebody gave to me was that you can't
Mm,
make everybody happy as a manager. Your goal is to make your team productive. In a lot of cases, that means making people happy, making sure that they're satisfied, that they have the things that they need. And I still struggle with that mindset. I want everybody to feel like they're satisfied. I want them to know that I, as a representative of the company, am looking out for them.
yeah,
So I sometimes know that I have to let some things go, but for me, it's just knowing that I'm trying and that I'm
yeah.
trying to do my best whenever I'm given a situation. That's kind of what keeps me going and keeps me handling it.
Mm. What challenges have you faced along your career then?
Oh, that's a good one. Um, yeah, I do think that this has been the most interesting in terms of challenges, like working in management,
Mm,
trying to get everybody, trying to figure out like what makes everybody work together well, the forms of communication, the forms of feedback that help make a productive team. For me, that has been the most challenging in that I feel like some of it isn't something that you can take from a textbook and learn. Like with
yeah,
engineering, sometimes when I was working on a more interesting technical problem, there was a solution. There was a logical, rational solution at the end. And I feel
yeah.
like sometimes with management, that's not always the case.
Mm,
And so I think those challenges have changed a lot from what was earlier in my career, where I was just really focused on my problem or focused on my goal. And I knew that there was a solution available. I do think that working in a startup environment, at least like when I first left my first career, working from a research environment, moving to a startup environment, my
mm,
biggest challenge there was that I was coming from this very academia mindset to this very delivery driven mindset. And I was not prepared for that in many,
yeah.
many ways.
Yeah, do you know
I
what that's it's a problem that people struggle with a lot. Get that when they come from academia and research to get into the commercial side of it and into the startup culture, that's often quite a challenge. So any tips around that would be really helpful.
Yeah, I think it's finding one that's the fit for you. So I think both of them have a very different environment, and it doesn't mean that one is not right. It just means that it might be a better fit for a certain personality. Like I really, once I was in the environment, I really meshed well with the startup culture because I loved having this deadline. I loved pushing myself and trying to really drive myself further. I feel like I'm a quite ambitious person, and I
Yeah,
love piling on. Everybody jokes that they like stress, but I was very much living the I like stress lifestyle, and
yeah.
so that was a good fit for me.
Has that
But
changed over the years then? Because that has for
yes
me.
and
I
no.
think as I get older, when I was younger, it used to be like a real adrenaline, the pressure and stress of it, or whereas as you get older, I think that does it
Yeah,
just
I feel like, yeah, when I was younger as well, I was always looking for my next like startup idea. Essentially, I always had like a bunch of projects that I was working on, and I was always, keeping in mind that I would love to find a co-founder to do something with. And the other day, a while ago, a friend approached me about starting up our own company and doing a project, and I was like, I don't know, this is a good and manageable stress level for me. I kind of have come to appreciate the stability. And I was really surprised to hear myself answering that, because it was so opposed to kind of this idea that I had of myself, that I love stress. But I feel like I mostly I loved trying to push myself to grow and learn. And I feel like that's more what I was interested in. It wasn't that I love stress, it's that I love learning, I love being challenged. And once I've now found that and I've been satisfied by that in my career, it's less that I feel like I need to pile everything on and be the very best at everything.
And I think as well, like there's periods, isn't there, where in your life where you'll feel like obviously what you're doing, there's so much growth in your current role, you're learning as you're developing, and there's loads going on. And right now that kind of, or whenever your friend approaches you, that risk might not have been the right time, but there'll be times in your life when you'll be ready for the next thing and ready for the next thing. And it's kind of, and I think as females, sometimes we put some pressure on ourselves that we've got to take the next step, we've got to take the opportunities while they're out there, because they might not always be out there and things like that. And you put so much pressure on yourself. But you've got to be able to understand that there are periods of real growth, and there's periods of steady growth, and there's periods of no growth at all. And that's fine. Like, it's fine if you want to work in a job where you're quite comfortable doing it, like back your hand for a bit, and that, or forever, if that's what you want to do. But you've got to do what makes you happy, and just being able to understand that's really important. So what about the next generation then? Like, what challenges do you anticipate for the next gen?
That's interesting. Yeah, I've been mentoring actually a lot of people, and I feel like they're having some of the same challenges that I had when I was first starting out in my career. I know that I was recently speaking with somebody in university who's applying for their first job, and they were asking me about, like, how do they know if they're being offered a fair compensation when they get an offer from a job? How do you interview for jobs? And I feel like those questions haven't so much changed from when I was going out there. And I know when I first was applying for those two jobs, and I asked my professor at the time how I negotiate a salary, how I know what I'm worth. He was like, well, you look up what you should be getting, and then you ask for that. And I went, okay. And in my head, I was like, how do I do that? I don't understand. And so I think if I had some more help and support in those areas, maybe when I was first starting out, I would have been much more prepared. And I'm hearing the same questions from people that I'm talking to now who are in the same position I was 10 years ago. Yeah.
I think that's so important. And actually, do you know what? So I don't think it's something we've ever discussed on the podcast before, but like knowing your worth when it comes to salary negotiation, because it is something that crops up with everyone. And particularly in times like over the past 12 months, luckily the market shifted the start of this year. So things are going really propelling, and there's lots of opportunity in the market. But over the past 12 months, whenever these like things like COVID happen in the market, there's an instant shut off for junior and graduate level roles, like particularly with remote working as well. It's been a real hindrance, and people have just put junior level roles on hold. So right now there's a lot of junior candidates in the market that are graduating or graduated last year that haven't got opportunities to go to, because no one's hiring juniors at the moment. They only want to take experienced people because they can, the word trust comes up, work from home, but they'll need more support, etc. But I think it's really important, because people do often, you just settle. And when there's times like this where it's so competitive, you'll just be like, take yes as the first answer. I mean, I speak to graduate developers all the time, and they'll say to me, I say, what sort of salary are you looking for? And they'll say 17, 18,000. And I'm like, no, I'm going to put you in at 25, because that's kind of average graduate salary now is 25,000 in the UK. But we'll always try and work with someone. But I think it's a really good tip. You can always get in touch with recruiters, are always happy to tell as well. So things like that takes absolutely no time for me to fire back and answer and tell people. So if anyone listening to the podcast is unsure if they're getting paid correctly, then feel free to get in touch. I'm always happy to give some advice on that as well, because it's so important. It really is. It impacts your life, your happiness. I mean, as much as we pretend that we're not money motivated individuals, I mean, we've all got mortgages to pay. So it's really important, isn't it, to be able to be aware of that and make sure you're being paid fairly for it.
One thing I'd just like to add as well is, so you mentioned being able to reach out to you. And I think one thing that has changed, and I think this is a great example of it, at least from when I was a student, is that there are so many more resources. And I think the remote work does make that more obvious as well. Like there's Slack groups, there's communities, there's LinkedIn groups, and all these people that you can access very quickly online who can help provide information and support mentoring to help answer those questions for you. So I think it's great to just reach out to people. The worst thing that happens is they don't respond.
Yeah, exactly. But message a few just to mitigate that.
Yeah.
Don't just sit there waiting on one person. Maybe message a few, and then I'm sure you get some responses back. So that's really great advice. What's been your greatest achievement?
I think oh man, I feel like there's lots of things. The first thing that popped into my head was the last company that I was at. I told you I had this opportunity to build the team up, and I hired the team myself, and I was so proud of everything that they accomplished. I hired a team that was very diverse, and I was working in a lot of different areas. So for example, I managed the app, the back end, and the embedded teams. So there was a lot of different work, and being able to see them all like working together, working successfully and collaborating in such a strong way. That's something that I continuously look back to as something that I was proud of. And I keep trying to think about like a self-retrospective to some extent on the decisions that I made and the things that I did as a manager or could have even done better that I can now apply today. So I feel like that accomplishment was a big turning point for me in my career.
So great. Did you manage to succession then? Did you manage to leave in one of your, because I feel like that's it's a real goal for lots of people, that when they do finally leave, they want to be able to, one of their team that they hired and supported, then step into their role, because that's a real achievement, isn't it? To leave a business, leave a really positive impact on the work that you've done, but also ultimately have someone that then stepped into your role that you've helped support as well. Did that happen? Because that's the real goal, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, they did have the team structure changed a little bit after I left, in that I think they since they were growing, having all of those three teams together didn't always make the most sense. But yeah, everybody in that team did step up, and there were at least a few people who I know have taken on more ownership and more management related tasks since I've left as well. So one thing that I know when I was leaving, I told the one of the other leaders there that I wasn't worried, and anybody on the team could essentially step up and do what I was doing, that they were all incredibly capable and could take ownership of whatever they needed. It would be fine without me.
So great. And who's been your greatest role model?
I think there's so many people that I've worked with along the way. And I actually, when I immediately think of the best role models I've had, it's mostly actually been a few of the women who have really had a big impact on me. At my first startup company, I had a director of engineering there, Elaine, who I've been in touch with since I've been at that company. I still reach out to her sometimes with questions, and she's never not had the time to help me with something. I've seen the kind of schedule that she has. I have no idea how she still finds the time for me and my questions, but I'm so grateful for that. I also at the time had a coworker, Jenny, who to this day, I'm so amazed by everything that she's done. And I also had the advantage of going to an all women's university, and I feel like there as well, I had so many people who have gone out into this work environment and who have handled this challenging male-dominated work environment in such a way that I just look at them and I'm wondering how can I be more like that? How can I handle this more like that as well?
That's so cool. Do you stay connected then? You all stay connected now and support each other?
When I first moved here, I actually went hiking with in the Alps with somebody that I had graduated university with. And she just happened to be visiting the Google office. She'd been working at Google, and we had a chance to meet up and reconnect. So it's been good. It's been really helpful. And awesome. I think that's
Well, so cool. Good stuff. So loads of inspiring females in tech, which is so cool. Okay, so I love to end the podcast then, Marissa, with some words of wisdom. So like if you were to tell your younger self something, what would it be?
One of the things that I'm always telling myself is not necessarily to compare myself to other people, but to compare myself to myself in the past. So even when I'm starting a new company, it can be on a very small scale. So for example, I've been here a week. What have I learned in the last week? What do I know now that I didn't know when I started here? And I think that even on the macro scale, when it's like, what did I not know when I started my career? What did I not know a year ago in my career? You can really see your growth over time. And I feel like that's much more important and much more impactful than saying, well, what's that other person doing?
That is such a great tool. Because like in the world of social media where we're constantly comparing ourselves to others, I think that's right, isn't it? And also, surely sometimes that's a good way to like alert yourself that maybe it is time for the next challenge, because sometimes you might look back and be like, actually, do you know what? I'm not learning anything in a few months now. It's probably some time for some growth and opportunity there. And like you're saying, it's also a great way to give yourself a pat on the back, because we're so used to giving ourselves a bit of a hard time, aren't we, for not achieving things by the age of X or within the next few months or that kind of thing. But I think to be able to go back and just compare yourself to yourself and the achievements you've had is a really, really positive thing. So that's really great. I love that. I'm actually going to try that now for the next couple of weeks. So I'll let you know how I get on with it. Do you know what? I've loved having you on the podcast and hearing your story, and it's super inspiring, and your leadership style is really refreshing. So I've really enjoyed chatting with you. If anyone wants to reach out and get in touch, Marissa, is it best on LinkedIn, Twitter? What's the best form of contact?
Yes, you can always reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm checking it all the time. So
that's awesome. Okay, perfect. So we'll get people to connect with Marissa at TaxFix. And thank you so much for spending your time with me this morning and coming on the podcast.
thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.